And live.
And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Network here at the Go Local Live Broadcast Center, deep in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island, the naked city, the city of, well, about 360,000 stories. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the Mighty Mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and of course the mothership, where this and shows going all the way back to our WPRO days, Coalition 1.0 we call it, are referred to both on our YouTube channel, our podcast channel, and our new page, Liberty News, where we will bring to you on a regular basis the releases and the information disseminating from people like the Rhode Island American Civil Liberties Union, the New Hampshire American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU nationally, organizations like Copwatch, organizations like Providence and Pawtucket, organizations monitoring police abuses of power and civil liberties there. Are we political? Yes, we are. In the next week coming up is, I believe, one of the most important and sacred observances of the year, if in fact you are fashion yourself, as in my case, an amateur civil libertarian, and you, shall we say, worship at the altar, if you will, of truth. There is no doubt, regardless of your political affiliation in this country today, that truth is under attack from a variety of sources. Some folks have gone to refer to this era as the end of knowledge. Ironic, given the incredible power in data processing we're able to harness to attack issues of technology and medicine, yet at the same time, we manage simultaneously to have lost and failed to observe the great institutions of art and culture that sit amongst us. In Providence, we are uniquely blessed. We are a college town in New England, and we are a college town, if you will, on steroids. Because not only do we have fine institutions like Providence College, Bryant University, I'm surrounded by JWU, as we call it downtown, Johnson & Wales University, but we are also home to Brown University and the Rhode Island School of Design. Bryant, arguably one of the finest business schools in the nation. Providence College, a leader in liberal arts with a Roman Catholic perspective. Johnson & Wales, a phenomenal school with regard to culinary and travel and culture. But RISD and Brown stand unique amongst them, and because of their presence, so much else is available in this city. The Rhode Island School of Design Museum. If you've never been to the RISD Museum, they have events for small children on Saturday and Sunday mornings. Bring your young ones there. Give them an appreciation of art and culture at the youngest age that you can muster. The Providence Public Library, going through a lot of renovations this year, but arguably one of the great public libraries in America. We've also got an amazing, and truly it seems like a reborn symphony here, and a number of groups that have spun off of that. We bring into town cultures and speeches and lectures and visiting scholars from around the world because of these schools. And they often can be heard for free right in the heart of our city here. Takes a little digging sometimes. Maybe go up to the Brown website, the RISD website, any one of the schools. PC has some amazing speakers come in, but they're here. They're not on some television show being ported to us from some alternate reality. Our reality is here, as Providence, Rhode Island, is that we are one of the leading art cities in the nation. And we need to begin to embrace it because, as I pointed out on the political scene more than once, the absence of these organizations would lead us to be just another failing mill town. The quality of our life and our economy are boosted exponentially by their presence every day. So why the big lead-in? You know, one of the great parts about having your own show is that you get to interview all the really interesting people that you might not necessarily meet on a day-to-day basis. Having your own show will afford you the opportunity to simply call up people that you find fascinating, represent as institutions that you find intriguing, and you get to talk to them. It's actually pretty cool. So one of the organizations that I've admired from afar, of course, is, and I always torture this, but it is the Providence Athenaeum. Located right here in the heart of downtown, an amazing collection of books in an amazing reading environment. Unique. For those folks who would seek solace in a big box bookstore, let me tell you, you haven't seen anything yet until you've spent an afternoon here. And so, in honor, I believe, of one of the holiest of holies, Dan Booksmith, I've invited Matt Parisi here. He is the executive director, relatively new to the job, the executive director of the Providence Athenaeum, to give us have a little conversation about its mission, its history, and of course, I'll repeat, in an age when knowledge seems to be on a path to death, why Dan Books Week is more important than ever. When an era when first world nations are engaged in authoritarian regimes who would do everything possible to kill off modern literature, never mind just political literature, but literature in general, it's critical that we observe this. In a nation, in an era, in a world where fundamentalism is on the rise despite overwhelming military opposition, where some of the most sacred spots in our planet's history are being just destroyed simply because of what they represent, freedom and culture and knowledge. It's critical that we embrace moments like this. Thanks for your patience listening to the big run-up. But again, thank you for joining me here.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start from the very beginning, because we're going to get into Dan Books Weeks, and we'll talk about that at length. But again, you represent and manage one of Providence's great institutions that I'm convinced a lot of people, particularly people who are new to the city, just simply haven't had a chance to get to yet. Kind of like our own little Statue of Liberty here.
Yeah, the Providence Athenaeum is one of Providence's cultural treasures for sure. It's one of the oldest libraries in the country. Its origins go back before the dawn of the Republic, actually, to 1753 to the Providence Library Company. And the first person to collate the contents of our collection was Stephen Hopkins, who signed the Declaration of Independence.
Right. Really, the earliest stages of American education and the learning renaissance that was provided post-Jefferson in this country. So give us a little snapshot into how it evolved and what its central mission is.
So the Athenaeum was there are 17 existing Athenaeums that exist around the country. Still, the membership library movement, it's a private library, sort of predated the public library movement and served as a template for the public library. But in all practical effect, the Providence Athenaeum served as the city's public library for decades. And so people would come and borrow on other people's shares and things like that. And some of our famous visitors over the years have been Edgar Allan Poe, Emerson, probably another well-known Providence native, H.P. Lovecraft, worked at the Athenaeum, wrote about the Athenaeum in his fiction and correspondence. Over the years, what's happened is the Athenaeum today is known principally for its collections, its strong collections. We are a circulating library. We have all the general interest books that you could think of, and along with DVDs and audiobooks and all the rest. But we also produce important cultural programming in the city of Providence. We produce about 150 cultural programs each year. For example, in 2 weeks, we'll welcome Colson Whitehead, who won the Pulitzer Prize in 2017 for the Underground Railroad, Armstrong, his exhibit on Walt Whitman, because one of the things in our collection is the first edition of Leaves of Grass that the library purchased for, I think, $1.25 when it came out. It's hand-inscribed by Walt Whitman himself. So that's a little bit of a snapshot of what the Athenaeum is.
You talk about it being a membership library. Elaborate, if you will, on the history of membership libraries in America, because that's really where the modern library movement began in America.
Yeah, so a lot of these institutions are also called mechanics institutes because in the 19th century, when many of these things were founded, or in the in the 19th century, really, a lot of the people who founded them were people involved in the Industrial Revolution, young tradesmen who needed places to gather information. So really it was kind of an internet of its day. It was a place to house resources that everybody needed. Mm-hmm. So the goal of the Athenaeum is named after the goddess Athena, of course, who is the goddess of wisdom and the useful arts. And both of those things go hand in hand at the Athenaeum. So we try to provide both those to the public. And although we are a private membership library, a lot of our events are free and open to the public.
When did we really start to see in this nation free public libraries?
In the late 19th century, that's right. In the late 19th century is when they really started to emerge.
And a lot of those were actually sponsored early on by some of the great, the Rockefellers, the Carnegie Mellons, things like that. Things. So the tradition, if you will, of public libraries stems from membership libraries, but still relies, if you will, early on the great magnets, if you will, of the time.
Yes, but the library is a great gift to the people. So over time, it became sort of recognized as a common good to have libraries, to disseminate knowledge freely, to democratize knowledge, and that's always been part of our mission at the Providence Athenaeum. The Athenaeum, although it is a private membership library, it's open to the public 7 days a week. And it's actually one of the more visited tourist destinations in the city. It's got about 60,000 visitors each year.
What type of hours are you open?
We're open 10 to 7 most days, and we're open Monday through Sunday.
Okay. And is attendance limited strictly to members, or is there a day pass? Or
No, you don't even need. You can walk right in the building. No, nobody will stop you.
Right. And I've heard that people will host private events there as well.
They do. We have
available?
private events, weddings, corporate events, those kinds of functions as well.
Excellent. So, your job as executive director, are you involved in curating the collection, or what's your?
We have a wonderful library staff. I'm not actually a librarian by trade. Kate Woodhouse is our director of collections and library services, and she really manages the collection. And she has a team at her disposal to work on the collection.
And if you will, elaborate on the whole notion of. I'll just say this: I grew up. My mom was president of the town library, so I wasn't allowed to own books until I was a teenager, and then I bought them, and I showed them off, and I told her they were mine. I would share them. But I grew up in libraries. Librarians are often thought of as just that kindly individual who finds for you that book. When you're looking or explains to you the Dewey Decimal System, or nowadays shows you how to go online to track down that book, or maybe calls another library. But it's so much more than that. What's involved in becoming a librarian?
Oh, a lot. I have such respect for librarians. I've had increasing respect since I've come to the Athenaeum. Librarians are going to help you find what you need. They're really collators of information, and they're also preservation experts, conservation experts. It's interesting in this day and age when we talk about the wealth of information, how much information is out there. Librarians can organize that information in a way that's usable and accessible and available to everybody.
Right. And at the same time, they not only do they need to be walking information centers on past publications, the classics, whatever private collections you're hosting there, but they constantly have to be aware and make themselves aware and immerse themselves in emerging forms of literature, which obviously are quite dynamic.
That's right. So digital collections, for example, is an increasing issue for us in terms of how we're managing those, storing those, disseminating those, that kinds of information.
Right. And of course, you've got publishing rights and areas like that. An organization that I hope to have on in the near future is an organization called Ideas Beyond Borders. And what they're doing some groundbreaking work because they're essentially licensing Islamic popular literature and some heavier literature, and licensing the publishing rights for some of the American classics, and they're cross-translating them effectively. What they're doing is they're translating them into Arabic, American literature, and then disseminating them free of charge in an act that may seem fairly low-key to us, but if you're in the Middle East right now and you're disseminating American literature, translating to Arabic, that's an act of outright revolution in many of the societies there. And the hope is, of course, and this is the goal, I think, of librarians everywhere, is to not only whet the appetite for young people to appreciate books and appreciate literature, but also just, it's through the common exchange with ordinary people of culture that friendships emerge, urban legends are dissipated, people are no longer demonized. So much can happen just by that exchange of culture, can it?
Yes, of course, and more than that, because the Athenaeum was really founded, it has its origins back to 1753, but the modern Athenaeum was built in 1836, and it comes out of this Enlightenment idea that republics have to be informed by their culture, have to be informed by literature and history and philosophy, and the measure of a great republic is the degree to which the citizens are informed and skeptical.
That's in trouble right now, isn't it?
It's in big trouble.
Because the notion of a liberal, a true, and please, you're a professional. I'm someone who just loves to immerse, but I'm not. A true liberal arts education is not sitting there learning obscure languages. That's not the point. It's not the point to delve into long ago cultures. It's all about critical thinking, isn't it?
Well, in traditional terms, a liberal education is really under assault. A liberal education in terms of the humanities, which is something that the Athenaeum really stands for, is
Right.
literature, history, philosophy. These things are not just useless things, and in a neoliberal age, we've decided that they are, but they're really not. And some of the degradation that we've seen in the Republic is because we haven't paid attention to those things.
Right.
We've decided that they're worthless, and that's why nobody has a sense of history or nobody has a sense of philosophy anymore. These are important things. And the founders of this country believe that they were important things, too.
Right, the very founders that we often, certain political organizations often ascribe to, in one sense when they're trying to justify an action by government, but at the same time failing to recognize the greater worldview that literally these Renaissance men and women had, and the role that that type of thinking and that type of worldview and that type of approach took towards actually generating the founding documents of this country.
Yes, so the founding documents of this country were really part of a great conversation that stretched back before, 250 BC. I mean, to 400 BC, to the golden age of Greece. And those people who founded the country, they were in conversation with thinkers like Plato or Aristotle or Machiavelli, who came much later, obviously, but they didn't view themselves as superior. They built themselves as having an ongoing conversation with those thinkers.
Right. And so that thought and knowledge was actually truly organic.
Yes.
And could continue to grow, not only as people currently expounded on what is known, but have not only the intelligence, not only have the tools as we do now, but also have the curiosity. And to me, that seems to be a lot of what's missing, that sort of basic curiosity about things that are beyond us, that things that we don't understand through easy superficial reading or easy superficial television or any of the sources that would spoon feed us information, but often from a very, I'll use the term isolated for lack of a better word, isolated source. Is curiosity, now your organization, I'm curious, is there an age demographic that spends a lot of time there? Are you managing to attract young people?
We are, absolutely. So the Athenaeum, we're doing everything from Rocky Marciano to Thucydides. 150 events a year. We've got events for kids. We've got kids' music bands, zoos, and people bringing animals into the Athenaeum. So we're attracting people of all ages. You're always going to find students from RISD and Brown studying in our alcoves. So it really is a diverse population there in terms of age.
Okay. So first of all, now the website is a lot easier to find than it is the pronunciation, isn't it?
Yes, so it's www.provath.org.
Provath.org. And it's a beautifully laid out website because, and for folks who have listened to this podcast and listened to the show before, you understand that accessibility and the organization of information to me is as important sometimes as the information itself. And so what we've seen is really a renaissance in websites who are able to provide, whether it be an organization like this, which is telling you about and how to obtain first level, immediate, originally sourced information and literature, as well as websites that are actually providing immediate first-hand analysis, as opposed to this constant regurgitation of someone else's regurgitation of someone else's regurgitation. It's amazing to me, and this is why books are so important. Because how is it possible? It doesn't matter which television station it was. One of the television stations had a great lead into an article about an issue of great controversy, and when I clicked on it, I found 2 paragraphs, and it was a grotesque overview of oversimplification of a complicated issue. So Springsteen's "How many stations and nothing's on?" has become true, and yet, reading the classics, reading literature, and embracing it in an environment where that's reflective of how it was sourced and written originally, to me is priceless, and it's literally the same investment in time, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. Well, I'm a big proponent of reading the classics. I wrote a book about it, so so I think it's pretty critically important to the health of the republic. I do.
Yeah. Right now, our school systems are challenged in this state. They are, for a number of reasons that are unimportant for today's conversation. but it seems to me grotesquely unfair, and that's not a word I use very often, I'm a libertarian, grotesquely unfair that folks who, and my children amongst them, my wife teaches at one of the prep schools, folks who, through accident of birth, through hard work, through life circumstances, are able to have access to an education, which includes the great works, and the great literature. So what can be done about that?
Well, I mean, the big thing that can be done about it is to think about the purpose of education in general, which is the purpose of education now has become about training the workforce. That's all anybody talks about is we have to train the workforce of the 21st century. The goal of a liberal education is to produce responsible citizens, to produce citizens capable of their own self-governance. It's quite a different goal of training the workforce and creating a responsible citizen. We have to get back to that citizen aspect. We have to get back to teaching civics and history. We have to get back to that.
Right. And I found it fascinating that one of the groups clamoring for this is actually the Providence Student Union, who are engaged in litigation against the city because, or I'm simplifying here, because of their failure to provide a healthy civics education. And underlying civics and a healthy civics education is an understanding of the classics, because so much of civics was derived ultimately from the classics.
Well, yes, yeah, absolutely. I mean, most of the ideas we cherish in America have their origins in ancient Greece,
Right.
and coming up and smelting through the Renaissance and through the Enlightenment.
Right. If you were, and I know we've gone far afield, but this is the kind of conversation I wanted to have with you, if you don't mind, and we'll get back to the organization itself. But if you, given your perspective, your unique perspective in stewarding an organization that immerses itself in this, if you were to prescribe to a high school student or a junior high school student a handful of things that they could study, perhaps their parents can help them, perhaps tutors are available, what would you recommend in times like this when our civil liberties are so fundamentally challenged and we're so ill-equipped to fight that challenge?
You mean what books would I recommend?
Yeah, what would you?
You know, Aristotle said somebody shouldn't come to philosophy too young. However, I do think that somebody about 13, 14 years old, they should begin to engage in the philosophical history of the tenets of our founding papers and the American state papers. And I'd probably start with the Federalist Papers and say that's where we have to start, and then move backwards from there and say, why did they think this? They thought this because of Montesquieu, they thought this because of Machiavelli, they thought this because of John Locke, and let's go back and just trace the origins of these beliefs and why they believed the things they did. One of the things that's very frustrating to me as an individual, as a citizen, is when I hear people always say, well, we live in a democracy, and you know what I mean, those kinds of things, because we don't live in a democracy, and the Founding Fathers were pretty adamant about that,
Right.
about us not going to the democratic model, because they viewed ancient Athens as a very terrible model for a form of government, because ancient Athens was imperialistic, it was expansionist, and the demos, the people, don't always know what's best, and you know what I mean, and so there had to be an element of democracy in the new government, but it had to be balanced against other needs of the society.
And ultimately, we're supposed to be electing wise men and women with the thought that those folks would balance the demands of the people and the mob, and at the same time understand the crucial role of virtue, of
Yes, virtue is really important, and that whole idea of a mixed regime, that you do have to have an element of democracy, but you also have to have elements of monarchy, as in the executive, or even aristocracy, and I think of no more aristocratic form of branch of government than the Supreme Court. You got 9 individuals elected for life that are accountable to no one.
Right.
So that's a
or
pretty
supposedly.
well, it's a pretty
Yeah.
it's pretty aristocratic.
Right. Or the
Well,
Senate, for that matter. I mean,
The Senate was originally people who were appointed; they were not elected.
Right. And the fact that you had even representation amongst the states, that was
Yeah.
reflective of the need to balance the perspective of the smaller states and the larger states.
Right, and the people had to be represented through the House of Representatives. There had to be
Right.
that democratic element. But all those 3 elements worked together, and each one served as a check on each other, so that no one faction got out of line and got too far out. We've seated, we can get into politics, I guess, but
Well, we've seen we've seen the boundaries that were created not by avarice or by power, but by I don't know, an ability to function as a society. We've seen those boundaries, we've seen those roles destroyed because they're not written down in paper. There was an understanding by people who had a background and a knowledge as to why you had checks and balances, as to why you had the House of Representatives, if you will, responsible for the budget, why you had the Senate responsible for, for review of the judiciary and review of the appointed positions in the executive branch.
Yeah.
We understood that, and there were reasons. They weren't simply annoyances to be cast aside
No.
for political expediency.
No, and there were very good reasons and sound philosophical reasons for doing it this way. And I feel like most people don't learn those things anymore. And that's probably a useful thing to learn.
Yeah. So give us, before you get to Banned Book Week, and again, thank you for joining me on a Friday night.
Sure.
This is, I'm hoping, I have a feeling this is a podcast. It's going to well outlive, just the temporal conversation here. Some of the events that you have that take place, or what have you got coming up for all ages, for example?
Well, we have, let's see, we have our Haunted Halloween party that's going to take place for kids. We've got our Walt Whitman exhibit that opens October 15th, free and open to the public. We've got Colson Whitehead, September 27th. We've got Karen Armstrong, who's a noted religious scholar, coming November 15th, I believe. And we have events all throughout the year. They're all available on the calendar online. We do fill up very quickly. Our events tend to reach capacity very quickly. So I recommend you go to our website and check them out.
Absolutely. And we will reiterate that, and we will continue to share and start to share some of those events on the Coalition social media. So we get to Banned Book Weeks. On a personal reflection, the first book that I ever got as a youngster that reflected anything to do with the fact that knowledge could be dangerous and needed to be banned was Fahrenheit 451. It was given to me by my brother-in-law, who was then dating my sister, and it was like 1970 or 71. And the trivia, of course, is the 451 is the temperature at which books will burn. And it portrayed what a lot of people at the time thought was some sort of fantasy society that could never exist, where books would be seen as an evil.
We have an illiterate president, by the way.
You won't get any. You and I may or may not occupy different areas of the political spectrum. I'm not going to disagree with you on anything you say about him. Not one little bit. What's the history, if you will, from your knowledge, of books being banned? When was there a certain moment in time or in history when books were seen? Was it the Reformation? Was it?
Books have always been banned. Knowledge has always been a dangerous thing. The book that I've chosen to read for Banned Books Week was banned by the Catholic Church as soon as it was published in 1760 around. And it was banned right through the 20th century. And every time somebody challenges authority, challenges the accepted dogma, that book is going to be dangerous to society. So ever since the printing press came out, books have been banned.
And there's something about the written word, and maybe because of its starkness, its permanence, the fact that it stands alone in refute of so many of these individuals, that seems to attract authoritarian governments. It's almost like a magnet for the ill-informed, the illiterate, for the folks who, it seems to be the current rage in our government every couple of years, nominating who's going to be the enemy that we're, as a culture, going to stand against.
Well, as our founders knew, the easiest path to tyranny is to create an ignorant society. And that's what tyrants always want.
So, the Catholic Church, obviously, had its moment in the sun, if you will, openly opposing science, openly opposing books as a challenge to religious authority. Where have you seen from your education? Is it religion that is usually the first bastion, the first challenge?
I think traditionally, historically, it probably was the Catholic Church because it was a large institution with significant cultural power, but governments obviously play a huge role in banning books. Now, increasingly, it's local governments who are doing it instead of big, huge bureaucracies. You'll see them banned in cities or in states. In the educational system, I think To Kill a Mockingbird was recently banned. I can't remember in which state. But these things go on and on and on.
Is it now? Ironically, librarians often stand as the last defense against that. We often have folks on who are attorneys practicing on behalf of the American Civil Liberties Union here on the state. I always call it town councils gone wild, because town councils seem to feel the need or feel the power that they can interpret great laws that have been, built up over generations of legal jurisprudence. They can challenge literally just about anything from that small-minded narrowness. But what appears particularly difficult, insulting now, is the attack on what I'll call the great media, the well-written newspapers. It's horrific to see a book banned. Do you take that same level of offense at the attacks on written journalism?
Yes, I think the attack on the media right now is pretty dangerous, I think. And I think, these are all my personal beliefs, so.
That's fine.
I believe there's a great danger in society that we're losing the great investigative journalistic vehicles, and that they're increasingly becoming, they're under threat from financial models, really, from the internet. And so, and also from our political leadership, who seems not to want an informed and engaged society. That's always been an important part of the whole American experiment.
Right. And the problem there then is that healthy disrespect, which is purposely cultivated, of the written word at its primary level, which is day-to-day journalism, then trickles down to why do we need this, why do we need that, why do we need to educate our children in this matter. Right now, I guess I forgot to pull it up. I got here a little bit late tonight. What are some of the banned books now that seem to be so challenging to educational institutions and to government?
Oh, I didn't come prepared with a list of banned books. I would say, you always see To Kill a Mockingbird for some reason is always one of these books that always gets
Why?
banned. I don't know. I think it's challenging to those. Well, I don't know, to tell you the truth. I'd have to write an essay about it and think about it.
And why are people afraid of words? I know why
Well-
authoritarians are afraid of words, but why is it that it's so seemingly so easy to cultivate amongst the masses, of which I am one? I stand,
Because
one.
people want to control your thought. Because there's always somebody in power who wants to tell you what to think and what to believe. And if they feel that if they can get rid of this information, then you won't believe those things. But everybody will always have access to those things, and the surest way to make a bestseller is to ban a book. So that's. I would, I'd love it if I ever wrote a book and somebody said this is banned, because it immediately would be a bestseller.
What have you chosen to read tonight, and why?
So I've chosen for my banned book Candide by Voltaire. It was written the same decade that the Athenaeum's, the Providence Library Company was founded in 1753, and Candide was published in 1759. So I've chosen this. It was banned immediately upon its publication by the Council of Geneva and the Roman Catholic Church. And it's been banned all the way up through the 20th century in the United States. It was banned in 1929. And it's a delightful book.
And why was Voltaire so controversial?
Voltaire was very controversial because he was he's a proponent of Enlightenment values, and he was challenging the great chain of being. He was challenging authority. He challenged the church. He challenged the idea of monarchy. He challenged the notion that we shouldn't have reason involved and that we shouldn't be involved in our own decision making, and that we should basically just take it for granted that everything was for the best. He said, no, it's not. Everybody's got to roll up their sleeves, get to work, and think for themselves. And that didn't sit well with the Roman Catholic Church at all.
Yeah, no, it usually doesn't. It's interesting because from my personal philosophy, since we're laying it out on the line tonight, I often see organized religion as really very often just a direct challenge to government, not because it challenges government, but because it wants to replace government as its own form of government. That's been my personal experience just through the years. I'd like you to do your reading, and then we're going to close out with a conversation. You have a full range of events coming up
Okay.
this week.
I've got to get through the introduction here. So I don't know what I can and can't say on this show.
You can say anything you'd like.
All right. So I will read the first chapter of Candide. If you're not familiar with it, it's a very hilarious book. It's very short. Candide, Optimism by Voltaire. Chapter 1. Is it all right? Just proceed.
Absolutely.
Chapter 1. How Candide was brought up in a beautiful castle and how he was kicked out of the same. Once upon a time in Westphalia, in the castle of Baron Thunder Ten Tronckh, there lived a young boy whom nature had endowed with the gentlest of dispositions. His soul was written upon his countenance. He was quite sound in his judgment, and he had the most straightforward of minds. It is for this reason, I believe, that he was called Candide. The other servants of the household suspected that he was the son of the Baron's sister by a kind and upright gentleman of the neighborhood, a man whom this lady had consistently refused to marry because he had only been ever been able to establish 71 heraldic quarterlings, the rest of the family tree having been destroyed by the ravages of time. The Baron was one of the most powerful noblemen in Westphalia, for his castle had a door and windows. His great hall was even adorned with a tapestry. All the dogs in his farmyards would combine, when the need arose, to make up a pack of hounds. His grooms were whippers in, and the local vicar his great almoner. They called him your lordship, and laughed at his jokes. The Baroness, who weighed approximately 350 pounds, therefore enjoyed a large measure of public esteem, and performed the honors of the house with a degree of dignified aplomb that rendered her all the more respectable. Her daughter Cunegonde, being 17 and of a high complexion, looked fresh, chubby, and toothsome. The Baron's son seemed in every way worthy of his father. Pangloss, the tutor, was the oracle of the household, and little Candide would listen to his lessons with all the good faith and age of his character. Can I go? Pangloss taught metaphysico-theologico-cosmocodology. He could prove wonderfully that there was no effect without cause, and that in this best of all possible worlds, his lordship the Baron's castle was the most beautiful of castles, and Madame the best of all possible baronesses. It is demonstrably true, he would say, that things cannot be other than they are. For everything having been made for a purpose, everything is necessarily for the best purpose. Observe, our noses were made to bear spectacles, and so we have spectacles. Legs are evidently devised to be clad in breeches, and so breeches we have. Stones were formed in such a way that they can be hewn and made into castles, and so his lordship has a very beautiful castle. The greatest baron in the province must be the best lodged, and since pigs were made to be eaten, we eat pork all year round. Consequently, those who have argued that all is well are talking nonsense. They should have said all is for the best. Candide would listen attentively, and innocently he would believe, for he found Miss Cunegonde extremely beautiful, although he had never made bold to tell her so. His conclusion was that, next to the happiness of being bored Baron Thunder Ten Tronckh, the second degree of happiness was being Miss Cunegonde, the third was seeing her every day, and the fourth was listening to Maître Pangloss, the greatest philosopher in the province and therefore the whole world. One day, as Cunegonde was taking a stroll in the castle, taking a stroll near the castle in a little wood they referred to as their parkland, she caught a glimpse through the bushes of Dr. Pangloss, giving a lesson in applied physiology to her mother's maid, a very pretty and receptive little brunette. As Miss Cunegonde had a gift for science, she noted in breathless silence the repeated experiments to which she was witness. She saw clearly the doctor's sufficient reason, the effects and the causes, and returned home all agitated, her thoughts provoked, and filled with the desire to be a scientist, musing that she might well be able to be young Candide's sufficient reason just as well as he could be hers. She met Candide on her return to the castle and blushed. Candide blushed too. She greeted him in a choked voice, and Candide spoke to her without knowing what he was saying. The next day after dinner, as they were leaving the table, Cunegonde and Candide found themselves behind a screen. Cunegonde dropped her handkerchief. Candide picked it up. Innocently she took his hand. Innocently the young man kissed the young lady's hand, and with quite a singular vivacity, sensibility, and grace. Their mouths met, their eyes shone, their knees trembled, and their hands strayed. Baron Thunder Ten Tronckh passed by the screen, and seeing the cause and effect, chased Candide out of the castle with a number of hefty kicks up the ass. Cunegonde fainted. As soon as she recovered her senses, the Baroness slapped her, and all was consternation in the most beautiful and agreeable and most of all possible castles.
Subversive stuff.
It is extremely subversive.
And yet, you are those who would take those words and conflate them into, the underlying horrors of society as we know it today.
Yes, this is to blame when it's not to blame. What he's really doing is, making it absurd, making these figures of authority absurd, making their beliefs absurd. And whenever a belief becomes absurd, it can be dispensed with, which is what the Enlightenment was all about. Get rid of this old thinking. Let's move forward.
Right. And clearly right now, amongst the body politic, we have our ideas that are absurd.
Yes, we do.
And
Extremely absurd.
Extremely absurd. And I don't know, how much is Greenland?
It's like it's 1802.
Okay.
Let's go buy Greenland. It's so dumb.
Right. But there you have it, the power of the spoken word. You know, without referring to a single real-life character simultaneously destroying all of them.
Yes.
You know, a more articulate, more interesting version of The Emperor Has No Clothes. You know, and that's the beauty of well-written verse. I mean, and I'm not a writer. I'm a talker. I'm not a writer. But I can appreciate great writing when I see it. And again, the irony here is at a time when it should be so easy to disseminate at little or no cost all of the great writing that has been suppressed simply because of, we'll use the new term, bandwidth or availability or the cost associated with putting it on a piece of paper as opposed to just putting it up there in zeros and ones. There's so little out there. How do you explain that, or can you?
So little of what out there?
A little well-written. Well, there's plenty of well-written stuff out there, but it's just seemingly the larger system, the internet, all this great capacity we have seems incapable. All these networks.
We're losing our filters, which is what libraries are great at. So, there's too much information, too much noise, and there needs to be some sort of, and obviously everything should be accessible, but it's great when you go to an institution like the Athenaeum and people can say, these are great books. These are books you should read. You should read them. And they're modern and classical and all over the place. You know what I mean? So
we use the curate word for coffee. We use it for beer. We use it for desserts.
Yeah.
But we're afraid to use it for the written word.
Right. Well, isn't it wonderful when you go into a small bookstore or the Athenaeum, and you see. I always love it when I go into a small bookstore and I see a staff recommendation and somebody's written something about the book.
Right.
And I take a look at that book and I say, well, this person really loved this book. What do they think about it? And I'd like having that because those people who work in those stores and at the Athenaeum, they love books. They love everything about books. So why wouldn't you think about their recommendations?
Right. And these are folks married to the written word because no one will become wealthy. Working in the independent bookstores of the world, or
the Athenaeum,
right? But at the same time, their skills have afforded them a lifetime of pleasure in their work, and their ability to share it with us is priceless.
Yes.
Well, yikes! What will we do?
Our event for banned books.
Please.
So that takes place on Tuesday, September 24th. We're partnering with the Rhode Island chapter of the American Civil Liberties Union. We're very thrilled to partner with them. We've got a lot of great readers lined up. Tina Kane is reading. She's the Poet Laureate of Rhode Island. We've got Colin Channer. I've got my list of names. John Stevenson, Vicki Warner. I'll be reading as well. It's going to be a great event. It is sold out. We do have a wait list available, though.
Mm-hmm. Speaks well for the city.
Yeah, there's an appetite for this programming. There is.
Well, and it's strictly the challenge is finding people, directing to them, and having the capacity to absorb it. Because once it's like great music, it's like the great classics, it's like great jazz. Once folks have discovered it, they're insatiable.
It's essential to your life.
Absolutely. Well, I thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure.
For joining us. I hope you won't be a stranger. Please, put us on your mailing list of things so that we can. Spread the word. We people have heard me say this literally thousands of times. We live in one of the finest small cities on the planet, and we do so not just for the obvious reason, not just because we can go down and get clam cakes down in Galilee, or not because we have great beaches, or not because we're just here and we love Rhode Island, but for all these hidden treasures throughout the city. And ultimately the Athenaeum is hidden but not hidden. For those who know it, they love it, they embrace it. It's just time the rest of the folks joined up, supported it. How can folks support your mission?
So come to the library, please. That's the first thing. I mean, even if you don't join the library, membership is pretty cheap. It's about the cost of a Netflix subscription, and that allows you to check out books and have access to some programs and things like that. But even if you don't join, you should come and see it and really appreciate it, because this is really one of Providence's great cultural treasures. It's unique to this city. Not every city has this. Not even every big city has this. So I highly recommend you just come and see the Athenaeum. And once you see it, you'll want to be part of it.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Congratulations on the effort.
Thanks very much.
Right now, we are the coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn free, civilly disobedient media broadcasting live on the worldwide coalition network here at the Go Local Live Broadcast Center. We're going to take a little bit more of an extended break than normal. Coming on shortly is a new friend of mine. He's a university professor at the University of Western New Mexico. I had the opportunity to meet him down at the border when the coalition traveled with the Libertarian Party. Interviewed aid workers, interviewed folks trying to get into the United States on the Mexican side, and his academic strengths and his unique perspective, literally being a front seat to history, can tell us a lot about the drug wars, about immigration challenges, about colonialism, American foreign policy. I look forward to developing a relationship with the gentleman we just had on and our new guest, to get them on regularly to provide us with their insight. Folks, stay tuned. It's going to be a couple minutes, but we will be back.